The fact about tarot decks and the whole tradition of printing and reading the cards is that the oldest, most popular printings are the ones that the largest number of people spent the most time looking at, utilizing, and frankly, arguing over as they were playing games with those cards. And this is not a point that a lot of other tarot professionals lean on as much, but it seems to me that it is those conversations, that continual use and exposure from the images that come from those older printings for cards that were actually in people's hands all the time, that have supplied the most meaningful experiences with tarot cards. The deck that I'm talking about is the Tarot de Marseille. There are roughly two major types of this deck, one called Type 1 that has been in printing since the 1500s. The other is the Type 2, which emerged in the early 1700s. Both of them have slight variations, but a great deal of wisdom packed into the way that the cards are arranged and the conversation between the images. So for those of you who truly want to know the language of tarot, wherein it's not as involved with things like astrology and other spiritual systems that are very useful, but that have their own structure and their own system for understanding. If you want to know the nature of what tarot has to say about wisdom and living life, then the Marseille deck is the one that you want to use. So to begin with the Tarot of Marseille, you will need a deck. The ones that I prefer for beginners are the CBD printing. It is relatively inexpensive, pretty easy to find. I also really like this reconstruction of the Type 2 Convert deck by Lo Scariebo. The colors are really vibrant, in both of these decks really, and the characters on them are very approachable. As far as books to read, to get you into the Marseille mindset and help you understand the deck card by card, Lo Scariebo has printed this book by Morsucci and Alloy. It has a description of every card along with nice big illustrations. I really like how they point out different features in the card. They give you some questions to think over as you are considering what the card means to you. Because in the Marseille deck, the minor cards are represented in pips. The major cards are not nearly as full of specific depictions of symbols as they are in a lot of modern decks. So much of the deck requires self-reflection. And this book is a really good approach to getting into that self-reflection. Along with the traditional meanings of the cards, it offers some history as far as where the deck came from, and I really appreciate that it has a small section on meditating on the various cards, and this helps individuals to fully come into their own understanding of what the cards signify for them, and allows them to grow along with the card. In addition to this manual, which is geared pretty well towards specific card meanings and using the Marseille for divination, there is a long-standing storytelling tradition that came along with the Marseille cards. There's evidence that people in noble courts, as well as folks in general, were using the cards to tell stories as pieces of narratives. An excellent illustration of how to use the cards to tell stories is in this book, The Castle of Crossed Destinies, which is actually an anthology of 2 tarot books that came with decks that Italo Calvino wrote. The first book relates to the Visconti Sforza deck, and it has illustrations of what that deck looked like. And again, as well as stories about how people might describe their lives just using the cards. And then the second section of the book is specifically from the Marseille deck. So not only do you get an introduction to the storytelling tradition from somebody who tells really amusing, whimsical, fable-like stories, but you also get to see this historical progression from the Visconti Sforza images to the Marseille images, which places you historically a little closer to how the people who created these cards in particular were thinking about them and what kind of things they were drawing from. An excellent illustration of meditation and the application of the cards to a person's life psychologically, and the way that somebody has grown in depth in their understanding of the cards, can be found in this book, 22 Impressions. Jessica Friedman, the author, is living in Australia. She commits about the first half of the book to tarot history. And she discusses all the different types of images that were available to the people who created the decks, and the circumstances around which those decks were utilized and what people were thinking about in those time periods, in about the first half of the book there. And then the second half, her impressions, are discussions of how these cards have manifested in her life, her reflections on what they have meant to her, and very direct experiences of her world and where she found those cards and her understanding of them being useful in interpreting what was actually going on in her life. So we go from an abstract opportunity to interpret the cards individually to a way to see them portrayed in fictional stories, to a very clear application of understanding the cards in a person's real life, which, if you are looking to read for yourself or for others, it's really helpful to see how somebody has studied the cards, incorporated them into their mindset, and oriented their sense of psychology and understanding with the way that the cards describe life. Now, a method that these books are not going to introduce you to, that I have found the most useful in my own study of the Marseille deck, is simply comparing the cards with those that are adjacent in number or suit. So what I mean by this, we'll take the 4 of coins as an example. Looking at the 4 and thinking about coins. Coins are something we use for money. They may have different values depending on where they come from, when they were printed, and the economic state of the times. They lie flat on the ground. They are minted from minerals that we find in the earth and then purify and transform. Although not all coins are pure, in the sense that some are nickel-plated, some are coated. They aren't necessarily all reflective of the value of the mineral that they are made out of. And so all of these aspects lead into our understanding of what the suit means. It is earthy, it relates to values, it relates to what we exchange for things that we need. And all of those senses of meaning can come into play when we are considering how to read the cards. So if we look here at the Four of Coins, there seems to be a sense of stability here. You see there is a central symbol with a powerful bull in it with a crown above its head. It is surrounded by large flowers, and the 4 coins in the corners are well balanced around this floral image that decorates the card. In comparison to the 3 here, you see that the vines are not nearly as thick as those around the 4. You see that this has one, what appears to be a little coin or joint in the center of the vines, whereas here you've got 2 of those, one between each of these pairs of coins, a little red flower here that supports the image of the bull. And whereas the flowers here are still kind of budding, these are much more open and developed. But they also seem a little constricted. So there's a sense that in moving from the 3 to the 4, stability increases, and there is also a sense that the growth that is in potential here has come to something greater in the case of the 4. Though the 4 has not quite moved on to this state of the 5, where there's a sense that there is something that is being defended, that is being secured, around which other elements are twisting, making themselves apparent. The buds in the 5 are not even as developed as the ones in the 3, so there is more of a sense of resistance and preparation going on in the 5, whereas in the 4, it seems like things have come to a point where they can be enjoyed, where they have a consistency. Now we can also compare the 4 of coins to the 4s of the other suits. And see what kind of meanings we can gain here. Now we see that in all of these, there are flowers pointing up. So there's a sense that things are moving in the right direction, that they are set in a way that makes sense. There is definitely more of a sense of stability in the 4 of coins than there is in the rest of these. And all of the flowers in the rest have leaves that are kind of protecting the flower, although there are not as many buds in any of the rest of the suits as there are in the 4 of coins. So we can look at that and think about how much more abundant things will feel in the sense of the 4 of coins as they might in the rest, and also how much more stable coins is as a suit. The other thing to compare are the major cards. So if we look at the 4 and the 14, again, there's this sense of things being upright, of things being in their place and being able to stay in their place. I like that there is also a little red flower on Temperance, or the angel in Temperance's forehead, just like that red flower there. And the standard that the emperor is sitting on is similar to, or at least there is also a standard in the 4 of coins, though the difference is that the 4 of coins offers the bull, whereas the emperor has the eagle. So whereas this is more about what is material, what is heavy, what is full of muscle, The Emperor is based a lot more on perspective and authority. Dwelling on these differences and similarities will help you to develop a personal relationship with each of the cards in the deck. Thinking about the card as a centerpiece and the other cards that are related to it as offering boundaries and relationships with that card that help you to define it. An important theme of the Marseille deck is that nothing exists in a vacuum. No card is as meaningful on its own as it is when compared or grouped with other cards so that their meaning forms a kind of sentence, a series of beats of energy that offer a narrative, interact with each other, and give you something to work with. In the same way that if we think about astrology, no one sign completes any single person, but it's our signs in combination that offer us a story about who we are and why that may be. In our communities, we have to interact with lots of different people. We ourselves don't exist in a vacuum, and the cards are the same way. The way we read them or think about them is going to be different depending on what other cards they are next to and in relationship with, whether we're meditating on them or using them for readings. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and for those of you who would not normally utilize the Marseille deck, I hope that this has made it a little bit more approachable and more interesting to you. Have an awesome day, and take care.